We're just over a week away from the NFL draft. It's a next man up mentality for the Cowboys this offseason. And what a draft for wide receivers. Could the Cowboys pick a wideout in this draft? Plus, we fill up the Cowboys shopping cart on this edition of the Blitz.
Pops out to the right, breaks a tackle. They blitz it. Prescott throws it down the right side for Lamb. Caught it! Back to throw, rush, sacked by Parsons.
Belt-tie snap. Prescott with plenty of time. Lobs it in zone. Jake Ferguson.
Okay, here's the understatement of the year. Things have been a little slow for the Cowboys this offseason, but things are about to pick up speed because the NFL draft is fast approaching. Bill Jones along with Nicole Hutchison, and welcome to the Blitz. We got a jam-packed show for you, and it's an exciting time of the year, Nicole.
Yeah, like I mentioned last week, we have now 2 more weeks. Well, now time is
less
flying.
than 2,
Time is flying.
right.
I'm losing track of the days, but it's time to get ready to the draft. I'm excited.
All right, and so the strategy that the Cowboys are employing this year, this offseason, it's a next man up mentality on this roster. Players normally make their biggest jump from their first year to their second year. There are players on this roster the Cowboys will be counting on in 2024. Let's look specifically at the defensive end position. The Cowboys lose Dorrance Armstrong. They lose Dante Fowler. The next man up, I say it's Sam Williams.
Yeah, it needs to be. I mean, in year 3, you would expect him to make that jump. I mean, he's a guy that had to fight for some playing time behind a steep room with Michael Parsons, D-Law, Dorrance, and Dante Fowler. But he made the most of what he could do with that limited snaps. I mean, he had 4.5 sacks last year, 4 sacks the year before. So looking forward to what he can do this year.
Yeah, you look at his sacks per snap in his career, and he's on a pace where he could have double-digit sacks if he has that number of snaps this season for the Cowboys. So it remains to be seen there. How about at the linebacker position? Of course, the Cowboys lose Leighton Vander Esch to retirement. Looks like Marquise Bell is moving back to safety, and DeMarvion Overshown, a player they drafted in the 3rd round last year, got injured, of course, in the preseason. We look for a big comeback year for DeMarvion.
Yeah, I mean, you saw what he could do, obviously, at Texas, and you saw what he could do in training camp. I mean, he played like a true thumper in camp, exploded to holes, was playing sideline to sideline. He did tell Nick Harris, our very own Nick Harris, at the Frisco Youth event that he is looking ahead to, making that big improvement. He had a year off, so hopefully that kind of, paid off.
And he really flashed in the preseason last year back in training camp. All right, wide receiver. Michael Gallup was let go, and the next man up at the wide receiver position, you have to look at the 3rd round pick from a couple of years ago, and that would be Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah, Jalen Tolbert had 7 starts in 17 games last season and really took some of Michael Gallup's reps last year. It's hard to really judge what you haven't seen, but I mean, you have seen some good things from Jalen Tolbert. He had 2 touchdowns last year, both of them on the road against divisional games against Philly and against Washington. So, I mean, I think Jalen Tolbert has it in him. Now it's just about him to go and prove it.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so that gives you an idea of some of the guys the Cowboys are counting on to step up. Next man up mentality. What about this draft, though? And what about the wide receiver position? Nick Harris is going to join us shortly, and we're going to break down the top wide receivers in a deep draft that includes this guy out of Western Kentucky, Malachi Corley.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz, presented by Blockchain.com, is brought to you by AT&T, an official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. And by Blockchain.com. Make your crypto play today. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, an official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys.
And it is almost Dallas Cowboys draft weekend, and you can be a part of it right here at the Star in Frisco. Of course, it all starts on Thursday night, April 25th, but it's not just that night. It's Friday night. It's Saturday as well. It's the Dallas Cowboys draft weekend right here at the Star in Frisco. As we welcome you back here to the Blitz Bill Jones, Nicole Hutchison, and now Nick Harris of DallasCowboys.com going to break down some wide receivers. Cowboys do have a need at wide receiver, and when you look at this draft, there are a whole bunch of wide receivers that will be taken in the first 3 rounds of this draft. How about we start with one of the guys out of LSU, Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, you say one of the guys. Malik Neighbors is the other, his other partner in crime during his time with the Tigers in Death Valley. But you look at Brian Thomas Jr., he brings a lot in his own skill set. It's kind of a hipster pick that I've seen in some mock drafts where the Cowboys, they go ahead and jump on Brian Thomas Jr. He's got this 4.33 speed that is really dynamic both on the outside and the inside. He does a lot of things across the middle of the field. And when you look at Mike McCarthy's West Coast style offense that he brought last season and how that could potentially develop over the course of the next few seasons, Brian Thomas Jr. plays right into that. His route tree plays right into that. I think it would be a weapon for this offense that if they felt like they wanted to go ahead and grab one in the first round, this would be a guy to go ahead and get.
What about Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky? He's a guy that wins as both an outside receiver and in the slot. That's something that Coach Mike McCarthy loves out of CeeDee Lamb. How much does versatility play a part in when you're looking for a wide receiver?
Yeah, what's the old John Gruden saying? Get this guy the ball in space and watch him move like NASA. I mean, that's kind of like how he is. I mean, you get the ball to him, whether it be in short bubble routes, slants across the middle. You just find a way to get the ball into his hands. He will figure out how to make it work. He's proclaimed as the Yak King yards after catch. He led FBS since the 2022 season in yards after the catch. He had the second most broken tackles with 77 of them. He does a lot of things. It's tough to bring him down. When he gets the ball, he is a dynamic playmaker waiting to happen.
And a strong guy, too. He had 27 bench reps at his pro day, and that's saying a lot for a 5'10" and 5'8", 215-pounder. All right, University of Washington, a number of wide receivers out of there in this draft, and taking a look at one of them, Jalen McMillan, who is an all-around athlete.
Yeah, there'll be 3 Washington receivers go in the first 3 rounds from that a team last season that was the runner-up to the national champion Michigan Wolverines. But what Jalen McMillan does so well, he was a slot weapon for those guys. And sure, he was probably freed up quite a bit by the presence of Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk in that offense. But he did a lot of things, too, to help those other 2 guys as well. He can get open out of the slot. He's a dynamic run blocker as well. If you're looking for a guy that can be able to kind of pave some running lanes on the outside, he could do that. He's another guy that could take those tunnel screens, those bubble screens. He has a developed route tree that I think will really work at the next level. It's probably more getting above the defense, getting over the top of the defense that he might need to work on quite a bit as far as being that big play threat. But if you want a guy that can get quick chunks of yards, I think Jalen McMillan is your guy.
I'm going to ask you real fast about Pittsburgh wide receiver Bub Means. He led Pittsburgh with 721 receptions and 6 touchdowns last season. Does he really mean business in this NFL draft process?
Yeah, he most definitely means business. Bub Means, 6'1", 215 pounds. I mean, he is a big dude out there. He'll probably be available there on day 3. And whenever you look at the Dallas Cowboys and you identify their need at wide receiver, how big of a need do you see it as being? If the Cowboys front office feels like, hey, let's go look at a guy on day 3 that could potentially come in and be able to fill that quote-unquote Michael Gallup role, then I think Bub Means is a contender to be able to do that. Bring him into training camp, use that 215-pound frame, throw it up to him in the red zone, see what he can do in those situations. He's a guy, when you throw it up, one-on-one coverage, you better be able to bring him down or he's going to get the ball.
All right, Nick is going to stick around here because we've got one of the unique draft stories coming up next. Guy who might have the most unique path to the draft when the Blitz continues in just a moment.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, an official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. This segment is brought to you by Reliant, the official energy provider of the Dallas Cowboys.
The 2024 Dallas Cowboys Star Magazine Draft Guide is in-depth scouting reports on the top college players with more than 400 prospects. Plus, there are breakdowns of the Cowboys' needs at each position, a look back 10 years ago to the team's dramatic draft, the annual first-round mock draft, and more. Get your copy of the 2024 Draft Guide at your local pro shop or DallasCowboys.com/star. We've got this copy right here if you want to look at it. But we have a lot of stars in this 2024 NFL draft. We also have a couple of unique underdogs with some unique stories. DB Quantz Stiggers is one of those guys who's had to persevere more than most in the last 4 years, and he's looking to make NFL draft history in a couple of weeks.
My journey ain't easy. February 14, 2020, my dad got into a bad car accident. I graduated in May of 2020. Went to Lane College August 1st of 2020. My dad passed September 19th of 2020. I ended up dropping out. Took that time off dealing with bad depression. My mom signed me up for the Fan Control Football League. From there, I won co-defensive player of the year. Got up to the CFL, won most outstanding rookie. NFL teams were reaching out to us, calling my high school, texting my CFL agent, and going into the offseason, I thought I could be a free agent because I played pro ball, but I had did my research on my own, and you got to be out of high school 3 years to be eligible for the draft. So once we realized that, my agent, Fred Lyles, just been working, and he got me an opportunity to be here. I feel like I got enough tape to get drafted, especially going from a pro league to another pro league.
What a story for Quantz Stiggers to be able to talk about when he possibly gets drafted in a couple of weeks. Nick Harris, we have him joined with us today. He actually wrote the story on Quantz Stiggers from the Shrine Bowl. Can you just talk a little bit about, what do you make of this story? I mean, it's pretty unique.
Yeah, it's unprecedented when you have a guy who didn't play any college football at all. I mean, you could just start with that storyline, and that's wild in itself. He's looking to become just the third player in the common draft era to be drafted without playing college football. But then you factor in everything that he's gone through off the field, starting at Lane College, not actually getting an opportunity to even play there because the COVID pandemic hit. Then he loses his father in the car accident. He comes back home working multiple jobs to be able to make ends meet for his family, and then a big lift from his mom to be able to sign him up for that fan-controlled football league just to get him back into the sport. And who knew that it would eventually lead him back into professional football and into the NFL. It's a wild journey, and from everybody that I've talked to over the course of the last few weeks, it's looking like he's going to be actually drafted. He's getting fifth-round grades. It looks like he'll go at some point on day 3. He'll probably be the bigger story that you hear coming out of day 3 whenever the draft is all said and done.
His story, I mean, you talk about a guy who's having to beat all odds since his high school days. I read where he had played on a smaller team out of Atlanta with only 27 players. And like you mentioned, he was hardly sought after when talking about offers, trying to get to that next level. What do you make of a player, though, when you see him and you're on the field? What jumps out to you most? Yeah,
looking at what he did during the Shrine Bowl, you look at his physicality. And on the very first play from scrimmage in the Shrine Bowl, you'll see him come across from over the top and be able to make a pass breakup in that game. And then throughout the game, anytime he was tested, he was locked down coverage. He did leave with an injury in the first half of that Shrine Bowl, but it was just a quick stinger, and then they just kept him out of the game. But his draft process, every single time he touches the field in front of scouts, he just increases that draft stock. He had his pro day around the same time as Georgia and Georgia Tech. He had his pro day back home in Atlanta, and 28 of the 32 teams were able to show up and see what he had to offer, and he had a huge pro day. I think it ended up stamping his mark as a draft pick here in a couple of weeks.
A lot of players have been stamping their mark in this draft process, he including a lot more. Up next, stick with us on the Blitz. We will have more for you, talking about bargaining, how these players could possibly in Dallas. Maybe it could be Christian McCaffrey's brother. Taking a look at Luke McCaffrey up next right here on the Blitz.
This segment was brought to you by Reliant, the official energy provider of the Dallas Cowboys.
The Blitz continues now. Bill Jones now joined by Kyle Youmans, and we're going bargain shopping right now because the Cowboys have a long laundry list of needs in this draft. And so we're breaking out the telestrator here, and we're going to take a look at. We're going to start with the offensive line. You got early round target, you got value selection. What are you talking about here?
So ultimately, all of those selections early in the draft can fill needs. Well, if you go one direction, you're not going to go another direction. So offensive line, of course, you can go pick up a first-round offensive lineman, and that's one way you can bring value into your draft class. If you don't go in that direction early, I'm going to give you another name that you could possibly look at later in the weekend. And just to provide a little bit of visual, I've got an actual bargain bin that we are going to pull out of offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, and of course, a little bit of wide receiver there too late in the draft. All of these are needs for the Cowboys. Some more significant than others. Here's one way to do it. Let's start with offensive line. This is most likely going to be your first-round pick. It'll be one of the tackles, one of the offensive linemen early. A Graham Barton from Duke, a Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, or in this case, let's talk about Amarius Mims. Just because we haven't mentioned him a whole lot later, there's a list of tackles that are possible there in the first round. Amarius Mims, big body, lots of inexperience. He only started in 8 games with the Georgia Bulldogs. If they don't feel like that is the spot early, they go away from tackle at pick number 24. Here's one way that they can do it. I'm going to go digging in the bargain bin for Matt Gonsalves in the 4th or 5th round. This is a mean streak sort of player. He's got great punch, great strength at the line of scrimmage. He's explosive. The one question mark around him is the durability. He was hurt for all but 3 games last year with the Pitt Panthers. After a year before that, he was a third-team All-ACC member. A 30 visit for the Cowboys, and if somebody doesn't want to take a tackle early on, or let's say you do go interior offensive line, you take a Graham Barton or a Jackson Powers Johnson, Matt Gonsalves could come in and be depth at the tackle position with the possibility to start as well down the road. So offensive line, you got to address it at some point, maybe multiple times in the draft. I think Gonsalves is a name that we're not talking about enough.
You know, but if you take a look at the Cowboys depth chart, look on the defensive side. Look at defensive tackle. The Cowboys have a real need there at defensive tackle.
No doubt about it, and they can address that early as well. Let's talk about an early round target in Braden Fisk and what he brings to the table. Out of Florida State, mean streak sort of player. I said that about Gonsalves. It's the same thing for Braden Fisk. He was the anchor of that Florida State defense. But let's say they don't go with Mr. Fisk. Let's go. How about this? McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M, 4th or 5th round prospect, much in the same area of a Matt Gonsalves. If you don't address defensive tackle early, go and get an explosive prospect like McKinley Jackson. His athletic numbers weren't necessarily over the moon at the NFL Combine, but his tape speaks for itself. He doesn't get pushed backwards. And what does this defensive line need for the Cowboys? They need an opportunity to clean up the run and make sure that offensive line doesn't move backwards. I think McKinley Jackson can bring that to the table.
Okay, just move back a little bit to linebacker. Obvious need at linebacker. What about there?
There's definitely a need at linebacker. You talked about depth chart overall. You cannot go to linebacker without addressing it. Early round target and a very good possibility. Edgerrin Cooper's on your football team going in.
A&M again.
Texas A&M, that defense, those Aggies, they certainly know how to stop it. I think Edgerrin Cooper's a possibility, but this is a name from early in the draft process. Darius Muasau out of UCLA, downhill sort of player, very instinctual at the linebacker position. He's speedy enough to go sideline to sideline. He's got a smaller frame than some of these other top valued linebackers in the NFL draft, so maybe not going to be a day 1 or day 2 guy. You could pick him up mid-day 3 in an opportunity to grab a guy that they liked at the Shrine Bowl. He was in the building for those Shrine Bowl festivities. Cowboys got an up-close and look at him. He dominated off of the second level in practices and the Shrine East-West Shrine game as well. I like Darius Muasau as a value pick on day 3.
All right, I want a wide receiver. Give me a wide receiver.
Okay, a lot of people want a wide receiver, right? This is just a Michael Gallup replacement. There's one way you could go into the wide receiver room and make a pick early. Let's say these early round prospects, I don't know. Who could we get here? Let's see who I put up here. Oh, it was A.D. Mitchell. A.D. Mitchell out of Texas. You got a well-rounded receiver there. How about a well-rounded receiver with some value upside? Mr. Luke McCaffrey. Luke McCaffrey, Christian's younger brother, started as a quarterback at Rice. He's very raw at the position, but with his athleticism and his football IQ, he's got a lot of that, and he plays a lot like his brother whenever he's a skill player as opposed to a quarterback. He's learned a lot throughout the years with the Rice Owls. He could take that to the next level, help take your offense depth-wise to the next level as well.
Hey, I have a long shopping list here, and you filled my needs. Some of them in a bargain basement type variety.
Bargain right there.
That's right. All right, Kyle Youmans, we appreciate it. And up next, we wrap up the Blitz. We talk about the Draft Day 5K in a moment.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz, presented by Blockchain.com, was brought to you by AT&T, an official sponsor of the Dallas Cowboys. and by blockchain.com. Make your crypto play today.
You not only have a chance to party with the Cowboys on draft day weekend, but you can also get fit on Saturday morning, 8 a.m., Tostitos Championship Plaza. It's the 5K run or walk, a kid's fun run as well, kicking off the third day of the draft. And of course, the Cowboys going to be very busy during the draft, adding to this team. And Nicole Hutchison, next week, we've got a dueling mock drafts here on the Blitz.
You have the Cowboys taking in the first round.
Now we're going to have
I
to
wanna
wait
know.
next week. It's the best mock drafts you will ever see next week on the Blitz, and we will see you then.